Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The wind whipped through the narrow alleys of the city, carrying with it the scent of decay and the whispers of forgotten God. Lena pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, keeping to the shadows as she slipped past the rows of crumbling houses. The air here was thick with the memory of war, and though the battles had ended years ago, the city still wore its scars like fresh wounds. The gods had fallen, and with them, so had the magic that once filled the world with light. But legends remained, tales of ancient relics and cursed swords that could grant any wish. Most were stories passed down to frighten children or entice desperate fools. But one legend had always stood out among the rest, whispered in hushed tones by thieves and wanderers alike. Tears of the fallen god, a blade that could make even the wildest dreams come true, but only at a terrible cost. Lena's lips pressed into a tight line as she thought of it. She wasn't true like the others who sought fame or fortune. Her reasons for finding the sword were simpler, more personal. She wasn't doing it for glory, but for him a lie. His name alone brought a sharp ache to her chest. The love they shared had been her one source of light in an otherwise dark world. And then, just like everything else, that light had been snuffed out. The sound of boots scraping against cobblestone pulled her from her thought. A figure stepped into view at the far end of the alley. Lena tensed her hand, drifting to the dagger at her waist. The man wore a tattered cloak, his face hidden beneath the hood. His stance was casual, but the way his eyes gleamed in the dim light told Lena that he wasn't here by accident. "You've been asking around about something dangerous," he said, his voice low and smooth. "People don't usually go looking for tears of the fallen god unless they're desperate." Lena didn't respond immediately. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of her dagger as she took a step closer. "What do you know about it?" The man chuckled, the sound barely audible over the wind. "I know it's not something you want to find. That sword doesn't grant wishes, it takes them and twists them into something else." "I don't," Lena said, her voice hard. "Tell me where to find it." The man's smile faltered slightly, as if he hadn't expected such determination. He hesitated, then sighed. "There, so the temple." He began far to the north, buried in the ruins of a city that's long been forgotten. "That's where the sword lies. But be warned, thief, the price it demands is far greater than anything you were prepared to pay." Lena's heart pounded in her chest as the words sank in. A forgotten temple, a cursed sword, and the promise of her wish of bringing alive back from the dead. She'd heard the warnings before, but she wasn't afraid. Whatever the cost, it would be worth it to see him again. Without another word, Lena turned and disappeared into the night, the man's warning fading into the wind. The journey to the temple was long and treacherous. Lena had spent weeks traveling through forests and mountains, each day bringing her closer to the ruins where the sword was said to be hidden. She moved swiftly, never staying in one place for too long, always keeping her goal in sight. It was on the outskirts of a small village that she encountered the group of adventurers. They were huddled around a campfire, their laughter cutting through the stillness of the night. Lena had no intention of approaching them, but as she passed by, one of them stood and called out to her. "The traveler," the man said, stepping forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and a friendly grin. "You look like you could use some company." Lena hesitated, her instincts telling her to keep moving, but something in the man's demeanor seemed genuine, and after weeks of solitude, she found herself slowing her pace. "I am not looking for company," she said, her tone guarded. "I have business elsewhere." The man's grin widened. "And where might that be?" "The road ahead is dangerous for someone traveling alone." Lena narrowed her eyes. "I can take care of myself." "I don't doubt it," the man said, his voice light. "But you never know what's lurking out there in the dark. Come join us for a meal. You look like you could use one." Lena glanced at the other adventurers around the fire, 2 women and another man. They seemed harmless enough, but looks could be deceiving still. The thought of a hot meal was tempting, and against her better judgment, she approached the fire and sat down. As they shared food and stories, Lena learned that the group was on a quest of their own. The young woman sitting across from her, a mage named Talia, spoke with a seriousness that caught Lena's selfish attention. "You're heading north, aren't you?" Talia asked, her eyes sharp. Lena didn't answer, but the silence was enough. "You looking for something?" Talia continued, her voice soft but unwavering. "Something dangerous?" Lena's jaw tightened. "What makes you think that?" "Because I've been looking for it too," Talia said, her expression grim. "The sword, tears of the fallen god." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. The other adventurers fell silent, their earlier cheer vanishing. I know the legends, Talia went on, her gaze never leaving Lena. As I know what that sword can do, and I know what it costs. Lena's chest tightened as she stared back at the mage. Then why are you looking for it? Talia's eyes flickered with something, regret perhaps, or fear. Because someone has to stop it from falling into the wrong hand. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. She had no intention of giving up her quest, but she wasn't foolish enough to underestimate the danger. She had come too far to turn back now, and yet something about Talia's words struck a chord deep within her. Was she the one in danger of becoming consumed by the sword's power, or was there still time to turn away before it was too late? For the rest of the night, Lena barely spoke, her mind racing with thoughts of the sword and the warnings that came with it. By morning, she had made up her mind she would continue her journey, but Talia's presence weighed on her. The mage seemed determined to stop anyone from reaching the sword, and Lena wasn't sure what lengths she would go to in order to prevent it from being found. Days passed, and the journey grew more perilous. The further north they traveled, the more the landscape seemed to shift. Dark forests gave way to desolate plains, and the air grew colder with each passing mile. It wasn't long before Lena and Talia found themselves standing at the edge of a ruined city, its broken walls and crumbling towers barely visible through the thick fog that clung to the ground. This is it, Talia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lena nodded, her eyes scanning the ruins. She had known it would be dangerous, but the sight of the decayed city sent a chill down her spine. The temple lay somewhere within, hidden beneath layers of stone and rubble, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to find it. As they made their way through the city, Lena's thoughts drifted to Ella. She could see his face as clearly as if he were standing beside her, his warm smile, the way his eyes lit up when he laughed. It had been so long since she had seen him, since she had felt the warmth of his embrace. The thought of bringing him back, of having him by her side again, filled her with a sense of urgency. She had to find the sword. She had to make her wish. Talia, on the other hand, seemed more cautious. Every step they took, she hesitated as if waiting for something to go wrong. We need to be careful, she warned. The temple is guarded by more than just ruin. Lena didn't respond, her focus entirely on the path ahead. She had no time for caution. The sword was within reach, and nothing was going to stop her from claiming it. The city seemed alive. Despite its desolation, shadows moved where there should have been none, and the wind carried with it an eerie sound, almost like the whisper of voices long forgotten. Lena kept her hand on her dagger as they pressed deeper into the ruins, her heartbeat quickening with every step. She felt the weight of Talia's gaze on her, but she didn't look back. They both knew why they were here, but their reasons couldn't have been more different. The path narrowed as they approached the heart of the city. Jagged stones and collapsed buildings formed a maze of rubble and debris, and it took all of Lena's agility to navigate it. She could sense the temple now, the pull of something ancient and powerful. The sword was close, and it called to her like a faint echo in the back of her mind. Talia's voice broke the silence. Lena, wait, we can trail rush in. The temple, there are traps, guardians too. This place has been untouched for centuries for a reason. Lena slowed her pace, but didn't stop. I don't have time to be careful. The sword is here. I can feel it. I know you want to bring him back, Talia said, her tone softer now. But you have to understand, tears of the fallen god doesn't just grant wishes. It twists them. The price it demands is more than you can imagine. Lena clenched her jaw, her grip on her dagger tightening. She had heard the warnings before, but none of them mattered. She had made her decision. The moment Ale died, nothing was going to stop her from seeing him again. I know what I am doing, Lena said, her voice hard. If you are afraid, you can turn back. Talia sighed, but didn't argue. She followed in silence as they reached the entrance to the temple. It was larger than Lena had expected, a massive stone structure that seemed to rise out of the earth itself. The doors were carved with ancient runes, their meaning lost to time, but the dark energy emanating from within was unmistakable. Lena hesitated for the briefest of moments, her hand hovering over the door. Then with a deep breath, she pushed it open. The air inside was thick and heavy, like the weight of centuries pressing down on them. The temple was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the rune etched into the wall. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the vast chamber as they moved deeper into the heart of the temple. The sword was here, Lena could feel it, a pulse of energy that seemed to resonate with her very soul. Every step brought her closer to it, and with each step, the pull grew stronger. Talia was silent, her face grim as they approached a large stone altar at the center of the chamber. And there, resting on a pedestal, was the sword Tears of the Fallen God. Its blade was sleek and black as if it had been forged from the night itself. It seemed to hum with power, the air around it shimmering like heat rising off hot coals. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment so many times, but now standing before the sword, the reality of it hit her with full force. This was it, the answer to all her prayers, the key to bringing Ally back. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the hilt of the sword. The moment she touched it, a surge of energy shot through her, sending a jolt of power racing up her arm. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she saw him, Ally. He was standing before her, his smile warm, his eyes filled with a love she remembered so well. Lena, his voice whispered in her mind, soft and gentle. You found. Tears welled in her eyes as she gripped the sword, the weight of it both familiar and foreign in her hand. She could feel the magic coursing through it, the promise of what it could give her. All she had to do was make her wish, and he would be hers again. But then the vision shifted. Alia's smile faded, and in its place was something darker. His face twisted in pain, and suddenly he was no longer standing before her, but writhing in agony, his body contorted in unnatural ways. Lena gasped, pulling her hand away from the sword. The vision shattered, leaving her breathless and trembling. Do you see now? Talia's voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency in it. The sword doesn't just give you what you want. It demands something in return. If you wish for Ally to live, someone else will have to suffer. It might not be someone you know, but the sword will find a way to balance the scales. It always does. Lena shook her head, her mind racing. I don't really care. I'll do whatever it takes. I have to bring him back. Even if it means causing pain to someone else, Talia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Even if it means dooming another life to the same fate as Ally had. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't want to think about it. She didn't want to believe that her wish could hurt someone else. But the vision she had seen, Ally's face twisted in pain, it felt too real to ignore. She stepped back from the altar, her eyes fixed on the sword. The temptation was overwhelming, but so was the fear. Could she really make this choice? Could she live with the consequences if she did? I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't let him go. Not again. Talia stepped closer, her expression softening. You don't have to. But you can choose not to use the sword. You can choose to walk away, to honor his memory instead of risking everything to bring him back. Lena squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had come all this way, fought so hard, and now she was being asked to make the impossible choice. But deep down, she knew Talia was right. The sword was dangerous. It wasn't really meant to be used, not by her or anyone else. If she used it, she might get Ally back, but at what cost? With trembling hands, she lowered the sword back onto the pedestal. The weight of her decision settled over her like a heavy cloak. But there was a strange sense of relief, too. She had made the right choice, even if it wasn't on the one she wanted. Talia watched her for a moment, then placed a hand on Lena's shoulder. You re stronger than you know, she said softly. Lena didn't respond. She couldn't if the pain of her loss was still fresh, still raw, but there was a flicker of hope somewhere deep inside her, a hope that maybe someday she would find peace. Together they left the temple, the sword remaining behind, hidden once more in the shadows of the forgotten city.